My parents kicked me out to house my freeloading sister and her boyfriend, then blamed me for refusing to pay, so I left them in debt and penniless. I never thought that being the responsible daughter would mean paying rent to get kicked out of the house I helped build. But here I am, sitting in my tiny studio apartment, finally understanding what family loyalty really costs. My name is Laura Martinez, and at 26 years old I've become an expert at recognizing the sound of my own dreams being crushed under the weight of other people's expectations. For the past 4 years, I've been grinding away as an accountant at Henderson & Associates, a respectable mid-sized firm in the heart of downtown. The office has those generic motivational posters on the walls and a coffee machine that breaks down every other Tuesday, but the work pays well enough to support, well, apparently everyone except myself. You see, what should have been my triumphant entry into independent adulthood, complete with my own apartment, a savings account that actually grew instead of shrinking, and maybe even a vacation or two, somehow morphed into an extended nightmare where I became the family's personal ATM machine. Every paycheck disappeared into a black hole of other people's needs, other people's comfort, other people's dreams, while mine sat in the corner gathering dust like forgotten Christmas decorations. Looking back, the warning signs were there from day one, flashing like neon lights that I was too naive to read properly. When I graduated college with my business degree clutched proudly in my sweaty palm, my parents Linda and Paul Martinez seemed genuinely bursting with pride. I remember Mom practically glowing as she dragged every neighbor within a 3-block radius over to admire my diploma like it was the Hope Diamond. "Look at our smart girl," she'd crow, her voice carrying that particular brand of maternal satisfaction that made me feel like I could conquer the world. "She's going to take care of all of us now." The way she said it with such casual confidence should have set off alarm bells in my head. At the time though, I just laughed it off as typical parent bragging. I figured she meant I'd be successful enough to maybe help out during emergencies or special occasions. I thought she was joking about the all of us part. God, was I wrong about that? The transformation from beloved daughter to family financial institution happened so gradually that I didn't notice the quicksand until I was already neck deep and sinking fast. It started with what seemed like a perfectly reasonable arrangement. I'd move back home temporarily to save money for my own place while I got established in my career. Smart financial planning, right? 6 months max, I told myself. Maybe a year if I wanted to really build up a solid emergency fund. Within those first 6 months, however, the entire economic ecosystem of the Martinez household had somehow reorganized itself around my paycheck like planets orbiting the sun. Dad's electrical work, which had been steady if not spectacular throughout my childhood, suddenly hit a rough patch after he injured his back lifting some heavy equipment at a job site. The workers' compensation barely covered his medical bills, let alone provided any income. Mom's retirement from her 30-year teaching career had seemed like perfect timing initially. She'd earned her rest after decades of dealing with other people's children, but the pension payments weren't quite as generous as they'd hoped. And then there was Madison. My 22-year-old sister had graduated from community college with what she optimistically called a degree in general studies, though I'm pretty sure the actual diploma just said Associate of Arts in the most generic font possible. Madison had approached her post-graduation job search with all the enthusiasm of someone being asked to perform dental surgery on herself. Finding employment, she declared with the dramatic flair she'd perfected since childhood, was just too overwhelming in the current economic climate. She needed time and space to discover her authentic self and find her true calling, rather than just jumping into some soul-crushing corporate job like her boring older sister. So naturally, guess who got volunteered to pick up all the financial slack while everyone else figured their lives out? The monthly ritual became as predictable as clockwork. $800 transferred automatically for my share of the mortgage, even though my parents had been paying that same mortgage for 15 years before I was born. Another $300 for utilities, because apparently my presence in the house had somehow doubled the electric bill. And then there were the groceries. Oh, the endless mysterious grocery bills that somehow multiplied like rabbits every time it was Madison's turn to shop. I forgot we needed milk, became her favorite excuse, usually delivered with the kind of innocent shrug that made it impossible to argue without looking like a complete monster. And we were totally out of bread, and coffee, and basically everything. Somehow, Madison's shopping trips always resulted in a cart full of organic everything, gluten-free this, and artisanal that, while my own lunch consisted of whatever generic soup was on sale that week. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just a brief detour on my path to independence. Everyone was going through a tough transition, I reasoned. Dad would recover from his injury and get back to work. Mom would figure out how to stretch her pension further. Madison would eventually exhaust her existential crisis phase and join the real world like the rest of us. We just needed to weather this storm together as a family, and then everything would go back to normal. That was 4 years ago. 4 long, financially devastating years ago. Meanwhile, Madison had elevated the art of professional helplessness to an Olympic-level sport. Her daily schedule was a masterpiece of strategic laziness: sleep until noon or later, emerge from her room looking like a confused vampire, shuffle to the living room in pajamas that cost more than my work clothes, and settle in for a marathon Netflix session that would make college students jealous. The remote control might as well have been surgically attached to her hand. Her evenings were reserved for social activities with a carefully curated group of friends who shared her philosophy that work was for people who lacked imagination and creativity. These friends, it seemed, all had parents who'd embraced the modern concept of extended adolescence, funding their children's journey of self-discovery well into their 20s. Madison fit right in with their lifestyle of bottomless brunches, impromptu shopping trips, and concerts for bands I'd never heard of but apparently cost a fortune to see. Whenever Mom worked up the courage to gently suggest that maybe Madison should consider looking for some kind of employment, even part-time, even temporary, even something that barely qualified as work, my sister's response was always the same theatrical performance. Her eyes would fill with tears, her voice would take on that wounded, fragile quality that had been getting her out of trouble since she was 5 years old, and she'd launch into a heartbreaking monologue about her anxiety, her depression, her overwhelming fear of failure, and her desperate need to find the right opportunity rather than just settling for any old job. "I'm not like Laura," she'd whisper, as if being responsible was some kind of tragic character flaw. "I can't just turn off my feelings and become a robot in an office. I need to find something that speaks to my soul, something that aligns with my values and my artistic nature." Her artistic nature apparently manifested primarily through carefully curated Instagram posts and elaborate plans for becoming an influencer in some undefined niche market. She'd spend hours researching ring lights and camera angles, discussing personal branding strategies with her equally unemployed friends, and dreaming of the day when companies would pay her to promote their products to her dozens of followers. When the influencer dream seemed too challenging, she'd pivot to entrepreneurship, spending weeks researching business ideas that required no startup capital, no actual skills, and preferably no work. She'd get excited about dropshipping for a while, then switch to affiliate marketing, then decide she was meant to be a life coach despite having never successfully managed her own life, let alone anyone else's. "She's still young," Mom would say with that patient, understanding tone whenever I dared to express frustration with Madison's complete lack of contribution to anything resembling adult responsibility. "She needs time to mature and find her path. Not everyone can be as naturally driven and focused as you are, Laura. Some people need more time to discover their purpose." The subtext was always crystal clear, even when nobody said it out loud. I was the strong one, the capable one, the one who had her act together, which meant I was automatically responsible for everyone who didn't. Madison was the sensitive one, the creative one, the one who needed protection and nurturing, which meant she got a free pass on all the boring adult stuff like paying bills and contributing to society. It was a perfect system, really. Perfect for everyone except the person funding it. "She's still young," Mom would say whenever I raised concerns about Madison's complete lack of contribution. "She needs time to mature. Not everyone can be as driven as you, Laura." The implication was always clear. I was the successful one, so I was responsible for everyone else. Madison was the delicate one who needed protection and support. I was 26, paying for a family I couldn't escape, watching my savings account hover near zero while my sister treated our house like a free resort. Then Jake entered the picture. Madison met Jake at some coffee shop downtown, and within 2 weeks he was practically living at our house. Jake was 24, worked part-time at a comic book store, and had perfected the same strategy as Madison: be charming enough that other people paid for your life. He had shaggy brown hair, wore vintage band t-shirts, and played guitar badly but enthusiastically in our living room until all hours of the night. "Isn't he amazing?" Madison would gush to anyone who'd listen. "He's so creative and artistic. He's not caught up in all that materialistic stuff like most people." Translation: he was broke and proud of it. Within a month, Jake had established himself as a permanent fixture. He'd eat the groceries I bought, use the Netflix account I paid for, and somehow always managed to be showering when I needed to get ready for work in the morning. He left his clothes in our shared laundry room and his dishes in the sink for days at a time. "It's just temporary," Madison assured me when I complained. "Until he finds a better job." But Jake wasn't looking for a better job. He was looking for a better life, and he'd found it in our house, funded by my paychecks. The breaking point started building gradually, like pressure in a kettle. I'd come home from 12-hour days during tax season to find Jake and Madison cuddled on the couch ordering takeout with money Madison had somehow acquired. I'd need to use my laptop for work and find Jake had been using it to browse music forums and upload his terrible songs to SoundCloud. "Sorry, babe," he'd say with that lazy smile. "Madison said it would be cool. I'll get my own computer soon." Soon never came. I started keeping my laptop in my bedroom. Then I started keeping snacks in my room too, because anything left in the kitchen disappeared into the Jake and Madison vortex. I was becoming a prisoner in my own home, hiding my possessions and tiptoeing around a couple who acted like they owned the place. The conversations with my parents became increasingly surreal. When I'd mention feeling uncomfortable with Jake's permanent residency, Dad would shrug and say, "The boy makes Madison happy. Isn't that what matters?" When I'd point out that Jake contributed nothing financially, Mom would get defensive. "Not everything is about money, Laura. Some people value relationships and creativity over material success." The irony was staggering. They were lecturing me about materialism while living off my material success. Things came to a head on a Sunday morning in March. I was in the kitchen making coffee before heading to the office for weekend work, when I overheard Madison and Jake talking in the living room. "I think we should ask for the master bedroom," Madison was saying. "It's bigger, and we could really make it our own space." "What about Laura?" Jake asked. "She's never here anyway. She's always working. And honestly, it's kind of weird having my sister around all the time when we want privacy." My hand froze on the coffee pot. They were talking about taking my parents' bedroom, which would presumably push my parents into my room, which would push me... where exactly? "Plus," Madison continued, "Jake's lease is up next month anyway. This just makes sense." I realized they weren't talking about Jake visiting anymore. They were planning to officially move him in and rearrange the entire house around their relationship. And somehow, I was the inconvenience in this scenario. That evening, I asked my parents if we could have a family meeting. I'd prepared what I thought was a reasonable presentation about boundaries, shared spaces, and financial contributions. I'd even made a little chart showing how much each person contributed to household expenses versus how much space and resources they used. "This feels very corporate, honey," Mom said, looking at my charts with distaste. "We're a family, not a business." "But families still need to function fairly," I said. "And right now the system isn't working for everyone." "It seems to be working fine for everyone except you," Dad observed. "Maybe the problem isn't the system. The problem is that I'm paying for 3 other adults to live comfortably while I can't even use my own living room because it's constantly occupied by Madison and Jake." "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Madison interjected. "You can use the living room whenever you want." "When? When you and Jake are having one of your 4-hour Netflix marathons? When he's practicing guitar? When you're both sprawled across the entire couch like you own it?" "We don't sprawl," Madison said, pouting. "And it's not like you ever want to watch anything good anyway. You just come home and complain about work." "I complain about work because work is how I pay for this house that you and your boyfriend treat like a free hotel." The room went silent. I'd finally said it out loud. "Jake is not just my boyfriend," Madison said, her voice rising. "He's going to be my husband someday. This is his home too." "No," I said firmly. "This is Mom and Dad's home. I pay rent to live here. Jake pays nothing and has no claim to anything. Actually," Dad said slowly, "we've been meaning to talk to you about that." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "About what?" Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "Well, honey, Madison and Jake have been talking about making their living situation more permanent." "By moving in together somewhere else?" I asked hopefully. By making this arrangement more official, Mom said, Jake's a good boy, and he makes Madison happy. We think it would be nice to have them both here while they save up for their future. Save up with what money? Neither of them has a job. Jake works at the comic book store, Madison protested. 15 hours a week for minimum wage is not a job, Madison. It's a hobby that occasionally pays. Not everyone defines their worth by their paycheck, she shot back. And not everyone gets to live rent-free because their sister works 60 hours a week to subsidize their lifestyle. Girls, Dad interrupted, let's stay focused. Laura, we've been thinking that maybe it's time for you to consider getting your own place. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You're 26, Mom said gently. Most people your age are living independently, and honestly, this house is getting a bit crowded with everyone here. I stared at them, speechless. The house was crowded because they'd invited Jake to move in without consulting me, and their solution was to kick out the person who paid for everything. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to move out so Jake can move in officially? We want you to take the next step in your adult life, Dad said. Independence is important. I am independent. I'm financially supporting 3 other adults. That's not the same thing as true independence, Mom said. Living on your own, making your own decisions, not having to worry about family obligations. The gaslighting was breathtaking. They were framing my eviction as a gift to me. And what happens to the household finances when I leave? I asked. We'll figure it out, Dad said. Families always do. How? Jake makes maybe $400 a month, Madison makes nothing. Your combined income barely covers the mortgage. Maybe, Mom said carefully, you could continue to help out a little bit. Just until everyone gets on their feet. And there it was. The real plan. Kick me out but keep my money. You want me to pay rent on my own apartment and also continue paying for the house I'm not allowed to live in? It would just be temporary, Madison said quickly. Just until Jake and I get better jobs. When? Jake's been working at that comic store for 8 months and hasn't gotten a single promotion or looked for anything better. You haven't applied for a job in over a year. What exactly is going to change? Maybe if you weren't so negative all the time, we'd feel more motivated, Madison snapped. I looked around the room at my family, my parents, who'd raised me to believe that success meant responsibility for others, my sister, who'd learned that tears and helplessness were more effective than effort, and Jake, who wasn't even part of this family but somehow had more claim to my home than I did. Let me see if I understand this correctly, I said. You want me to move out, find my own place, pay my own rent, and also continue paying $800 a month toward the mortgage on the house I'm no longer allowed to live in. It's not about being allowed, Mom said. It's about what makes sense for everyone. What makes sense is the person paying for the house getting to live in it. Money isn't everything, Laura, Dad said. Family is about more than financial contributions. Then prove it. Live without my financial contributions. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the panic flickering across their faces as they realized I might actually mean it. Honey, Mom said carefully, you're upset. Why don't we table this discussion for now and revisit it when everyone's calmer? I'm perfectly calm. And I've made my decision. If you want me to move out, I'll move out. But I won't be paying for a house I don't live in. That's completely unreasonable, Madison said, tears starting to form. This family has always been there for you. Now when we need your help, you're just going to abandon us? The way you're abandoning me? We're not abandoning you. We're encouraging you to grow. By making me homeless while I pay for your boyfriend's room and board? Nobody's making you homeless, Dad said, his voice getting sharper. You have a good job. You can afford your own place. And you can afford yours without my help. Laura, Mom said, her voice taking on that disappointed tone I'd heard my entire childhood. I'm really surprised by this attitude. This isn't the daughter we raised. You're right. The daughter you raised would have said yes immediately, found an apartment, and continued funding your lifestyle while living in poverty herself. But that daughter was an idiot. Madison gasped. How can you say that about family? Easy? I open my mouth and words come out. Just like you do when you're asking me to pay for things. The tears were flowing freely now. Madison had perfected the art of crying on command, and it usually worked on our parents. They both moved to comfort her while shooting me accusatory looks. There's no need to be cruel, Mom said. What's cruel is asking someone to pay rent on a house they're being evicted from. What's cruel is taking advantage of your daughter's sense of family loyalty to fund your retirement and your other daughter's refusal to work. That's enough, Dad said firmly. If this is how you really feel about your family, then maybe it is better for you to leave. Fine. I'll be out by Friday. I stood up and walked toward my room, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. As I reached the hallway, I heard Madison whisper, "I can't believe she's being so selfish." I packed that night. 4 years of living like a family ATM, and they thought I was the selfish one for finally saying no. By Thursday, I'd found a small studio apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The rent was $600 a month, utilities included. For the first time in 4 years, I'd have money left over after paying my own expenses. The moving process was surreal. My family watched me pack like I was betraying them by leaving, even though they'd asked me to go. Madison kept making comments about how tiny my new place would be, as if she was trying to make me feel bad about downgrading. Jake helped carry boxes to my car with the enthusiasm of someone who couldn't wait to claim my bedroom. "This is really what you want?" Mom asked as I loaded the last of my belongings. What I wanted was to live in a house where I was treated like family instead of a tenant. But since that wasn't an option, yes, this is what I want. "You know you can come back any time," she said. "This will always be your home." "No, it won't. You made that very clear." I drove away from my childhood home that Friday afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. No more hiding groceries in my bedroom. No more negotiating for shower time. No more coming home to find Jake using my laptop or Madison wearing my clothes because she'd run out of clean laundry. The first month in my studio was paradise. I bought groceries for one person and actually got to eat them. I watched what I wanted on Netflix. I did laundry on my own schedule. I went to bed early without listening to Jake's guitar through the wall. But the real test came when the bills were due. 3 weeks after I moved out, my phone started ringing. First it was Mom, calling to check in and mention casually that money was a bit tight this month. Then it was Dad, asking if I could help out temporarily while they adjusted to the new budget. Finally, it was Madison, crying about how unfair it was that I was punishing everyone because of my own problems. "It's just $600, she sobbed into the phone. "You're being so mean about this. $600 is almost my entire rent, Madison. But you're only paying for yourself now. We have more people to take care of. You have more people because you chose to have more people. That was your decision. Jake is family now. Jake is your unemployed boyfriend who's never contributed a dime to anything. How can you be so heartless?" The calls continued for weeks. Sometimes it was guilt. "Your mother is so stressed about money she can't sleep." Sometimes it was anger. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Sometimes it was manipulation. "Madison had to get a job at a grocery store because of you. She's miserable." Good, I thought. Welcome to adulthood. The breaking point came 2 months after I'd moved out. I was at work, enjoying a particularly satisfying day of organizing someone else's finances, when my phone rang. It was Dad. "Laura, we need to talk." "I'm at work, Dad. This can't wait. We're having serious financial problems and it's because of your selfishness." I stepped outside to take the call. "Excuse me? You heard me. This family is struggling because you decided to be vindictive and cut us off. I decided to stop paying for a house I don't live in. That's not vindictive, it's logical. It's cruel and selfish, and honestly, your mother and I are ashamed of the person you've become." Something inside me snapped. 4 years of sacrifice, 4 years of being taken for granted, 4 years of funding other people's dreams while mine suffocated, and now I was the villain for saying no. "You're ashamed of me? You should be ashamed of yourselves. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? You raised one daughter to believe that her worth was measured by how much she could sacrifice for others, and another daughter to believe that she deserved to be sacrificed for. You created a system where I worked myself to death to fund Madison's extended adolescence, and when I finally said enough, you acted like I was betraying the family. This family has always supported you. When? When have you supported me? When I graduated college and you immediately started charging me rent? When I got promoted and you increased my contribution to household expenses? When I wanted to take a vacation and you guilt-tripped me about money being tight? We gave you a place to live. I paid for that place. I paid more in rent than most people pay for their own apartments. And in return, I got to share a bathroom with my sister's unemployed boyfriend and eat ramen noodles because my grocery budget went to everyone else's steaks. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. And here's some more honesty. Madison is not going to magically become responsible just because I'm not there to enable her anymore. Jake is not going to suddenly become ambitious just because his meal ticket moved out. And you and Mom are not going to be able to maintain your current lifestyle without someone else paying for it. So you're just going to let your family suffer? I'm going to let my family experience the consequences of their own choices, just like I'm experiencing the consequences of mine. Laura, please. No. I'm done. I spent 4 years being your ATM, and the moment I stopped dispensing cash, I became the worst daughter in the world. I'm done feeling guilty for having boundaries. I'm done funding other people's irresponsibility. And I'm definitely done with this conversation. I hung up and turned off my phone. That evening, I went home to my tiny studio apartment, ordered Chinese food for one, and watched a movie I actually wanted to see. Nobody borrowed my laptop. Nobody ate my leftovers. Nobody asked me for money. It was the most peaceful evening I'd had in 4 years. The harassment continued for a few more weeks, but I'd blocked their numbers and started screening my emails. Occasionally, I'd get messages through mutual friends or distant relatives about how worried everyone was about the family's financial situation, how Madison was struggling to adjust to working life, how my parents were hurt by my abandonment. I felt bad for about 5 minutes. Then I remembered that this was the same family who'd kicked me out to make room for Madison's boyfriend, and then expected me to keep paying their bills from my new apartment. 6 months after moving out, I got a promotion at work. The raise was substantial enough that I could afford to move to a 1-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. For the first time in my adult life, I had savings, real savings, not the emergency fund that constantly got depleted for family emergencies. A year later, I started dating someone I met through work. David was a financial planner who understood the importance of boundaries and personal responsibility. When I told him about my family situation, he didn't suggest that I should forgive and forget. He said I was brave for breaking the cycle. Codependency disguised as family loyalty, he called it. Classic manipulation tactic. Sometimes I wondered how my family was doing, but I resisted the urge to check their social media or ask mutual friends for updates. I'd learned that curiosity was just another form of emotional attachment, and I was working hard to detach from people who'd only valued me for what I could provide. 2 years after I moved out, I bought my own house. It was small but beautiful, with a garden and a home office and space for all the things I'd never been able to have when I was funding other people's lives. I sent a photo to my college roommate, who'd watched my family drama unfold over the years. "I'm so proud of you," she texted back. "You finally chose yourself." She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen my own financial security over my family's expectations. I'd chosen my own peace of mind over their manufactured guilt. I'd chosen my own future over their immediate comfort. It had taken me 26 years to learn that love shouldn't cost everything you have to give. Real family doesn't ask you to sacrifice your dreams to fund their comfort. Real family doesn't kick you out and then demand you keep paying rent. I used to think that being a good daughter meant saying yes to everything, giving until it hurt, and putting everyone else's needs before my own. Now I know that being a good person means having boundaries, expecting reciprocity, and refusing to enable other people's poor choices. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my family, if I regret cutting them off, if I think I was too harsh. The answer is simple: I miss the family I thought I had, but I don't miss being used. I don't regret choosing myself over people who only valued me for my paycheck. And I'm not too harsh for expecting basic respect from the people who raised me. I learned that some bridges are worth burning, especially when they only lead back to places that were never really home. My real home is here, in this house I bought with money I earned and kept, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough.